Direct News TV. October 2, 2023. Russia-Ukraine war updates, EU foreign ministers to meet in Kyiv. European Union foreign ministers meeting in Kyiv on Monday for the first time as bloc's foreign policy chief says Ukraine's future lies within the EU. Russian shelling of Ukraine's southern region of Kherson overnight killed at least one person and injured 6, including 2 children, according to regional governor Alexander Prokudin. Kyiv says Moscow has launched at least 10 missile strikes and 89 airstrikes across Ukraine over the past day. Ukrainian army also says it launched 13 airstrikes on Russian positions within Ukraine in the last 24 hours. The future of U.S. aid for Ukraine hangs in the balance after a last-gasp deal to avoid a government shutdown excludes new funding for Ukraine amid opposition from hardline Republicans. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was killed in an unexplained plane crash 40 days ago as of Sunday, has been hailed by his supporters as a patriotic hero of Russia despite his role as a mutinous mercenary chief. Wrap-up of important developments. All 27 European Union foreign ministers met in Kyiv for a historic summit on long-term assistance to Ukraine. Ukraine slammed Elon Musk's social media post mocking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's pleas for wartime assistance from the West. The Kremlin says Western fatigue over the conflict will grow as the future of United States aid for Kyiv is hanging in the balance after the U.S. Congress blocked a new aid package for Ukraine. The British Defence Ministry said Moscow's defence spending is set to increase to about 30% of total public expenditure next year, according to leaked documents from the Russian Defense Ministry. Mourners in Russia marked 40 days since the Wagner Group mercenary chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, died in a plane crash that killed several others. Kyiv urges the EU to back regular grain exports. Kyiv urges the EU to support its initiative for regular grain exports through a Black Sea corridor amid a growing rift between Kyiv and its neighbors. If the EU and Ukraine join forces to guarantee the security of this corridor, then this corridor will be able to work at full capacity, FM Dmytro Kuleba said in a joint press conference with EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell. Ukraine's Kuleba seeks accelerated transfer of frozen Russian assets. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says legal work should be accelerated to transfer frozen Russian assets to Kyiv. Following a meeting of European Union foreign ministers, Kuleba said more clarity on the legality of how to transfer the funds would benefit both the EU and Ukraine. These assets, he added, could help fund Ukraine's reconstruction efforts. At least one person killed in Kherson, Governor. At least one person has been killed in Russian shelling in southern Ukraine's Kherson region, its governor says. Alexander Prokudin said on Telegram that Russian forces hit residential areas overnight, which resulted in the death of a policeman. In an earlier post, Prokudin said 8 people were injured during the attacks, including 2 children, ages 12 and 13, and their mother. EU Foreign Policy Chief proposes $5.26 billion in military aid to Ukraine in 2024. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has proposed a new military aid package of up to €5 billion, $5.26 billion, for Ukraine next year. In a joint press conference with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, he said, "I hope we can reach an agreement before the end of the year." Denmark to spend $14.1 million as part of EU ammunition order for Ukraine. The Danish Ministry of Defense says Copenhagen will spend 100 million kroner, $14.1 million, in a joint European order for ammunition to help Ukraine. On Friday, the European Defence Agency, EDA, said 7 EU countries have ordered 155mm artillery rounds for Kyiv and to replenish depleted stocks. Delivery is expected in 2024. With the abolition of the EU defence reservation last year, Denmark has the opportunity to participate fully in European defence cooperation, including in EDA, Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen said in a statement. Joint steps will ensure the war ends in just peace, Zelensky says. Zelensky says the meeting of EU foreign ministers adds strength, leadership and initiative to Europe as delegates discuss long-term support for Kyiv. On X, Zelensky wrote, "Active European leadership is essential. The more joint and principled steps in defense, diplomacy, economy, and sanctions we take together, the sooner the war will end in just peace. If I go to Russia, I'll be immediately arrested." Pussy Riot member Nadia Tolokonnikova, an artist and activist, was placed on Russia's most wanted list in March. Weeks earlier, she had released an irreverent short film titled Putin's Ashes, in which a group of women from Ukraine, Russia and Belarus, dressed in lingerie and wearing red balaclavas, pressed the nuclear button and set alight a 3-meter, 10 feet, portrait of the Russian president. A founding member of the Russian punk collective Pussy Riot, Tolokonnikova spoke to us about the war in Ukraine, rights in Russia and the threats she faces as a dissident. Estonian volunteer reported killed while fighting in Ukraine's Donetsk. An Estonian volunteer who fought with Ukrainian soldiers against Russian forces in Lyman in Donetsk has been reported killed on Monday. No immediate details are available on the identity of the Estonian volunteer. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has attracted foreign fighters volunteering for both sides of the conflict, with fighters coming from nearby countries to as far as Nepal. After the war broke out last year, Ukraine formed its own international volunteer force, reportedly attracting as many as 20,000 soldiers from at least 52 nations, although that number has significantly dwindled. Russia had also recruited its own group of fighters, with some reportedly coming from Afghanistan. Zelensky says cooperation with EU vital for victory. A Ukrainian victory in the war with Russia depends on cooperation with the European Union, President Volodymyr Zelensky told EU foreign ministers in Kyiv. Zelensky also underlined the importance of defense support for Ukraine during the war. Ukraine needs a winter protection plan. Ahead of the EU foreign ministers meeting in Kyiv, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock calls for the creation of a strategy to insulate Ukraine from the fallout of a feared campaign of Russian airstrikes on the energy grid in the coming months as temperatures drop. Ukraine needs a winter protection plan of air defense, generators and a strengthening of the energy supply, Baerbock said in Kyiv. "We saw last winter the brutal way in which the Russian president wages this war with targeted attacks on critical infrastructure such as power plants. Russian strike destroys Ukrainian fuel depot, military aircraft in Dnipro, Moscow. The Russian Defense Ministry says it destroyed Ukrainian fuel depots and military aircraft in a strike in Dolgentsevo airfield in Dnipro, according to the news website Zvezda. There were no immediate reports of casualties in the strike on Monday. 2 armored combat vehicles, 3 cars, and 2 self-propelled artillery systems were also destroyed, as well as a navigation jamming station, the report adds. German Economy Ministry, military exports to Ukraine surged to $3.48 billion. Germany's economy ministry has announced that its exports of military equipment to Ukraine has grown more than fourfold so far this year, to €3.3 billion, $3.48 billion. That makes Kyiv the main recipient of German arms, the economy ministry was quoted by Reuters as saying. For the first 9 months of the year, Ukraine accounts for more than a third of Germany's total military exports, €8.76 billion, $9.23 billion. Who has pledged what to Ukraine? There's been a lot of talk over the weekend about Western assistance to Ukraine after U.S. President Joe Biden signed a stopgap funding bill that did not include aid for Kyiv. Meanwhile, the EU has promised to increase its support for the war-torn country. Amid all this, here's a comprehensive infographic detailing who was pledged what in terms of financial, humanitarian and military aid. Ukrainian soldiers reported killed in Russian strikes in Donetsk. We are getting a report that Ukrainian service members have been killed in Russian strikes near Siversk in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region. The exact number of fatalities cannot be immediately determined. Donetsk and other frontline areas of Ukraine have been undergoing heavy bombardment by Russia in the past 24 hours. Ukraine PM Shmyhal meets visiting IMF officials. Ukraine's Hromadske Radio is reporting that officials from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, are visiting Kyiv for the first time in more than 3 years to discuss the lending institution's implementation of a 4-year assistance program worth $15.6 billion. The visit coincides with the meeting of European Union foreign ministers in the Ukrainian capital. The report quoted Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal as telling IMF officials that Ukraine needs funds to cover its budget deficit, as well as its needs for recovery and reconstruction after the ongoing invasion of Russia comes to an end. Anger in Ukraine after Musk's post mocking Zelensky. Anger has erupted in Ukraine over Elon Musk's social media post mocking President Volodymyr Zelensky's pleas for wartime assistance from the West. The Speaker of Ukraine's parliament, Ruslan Stefanchuk, has hit out at Musk on X, formerly Twitter. The case when Elon Musk tried to conquer space, but something went wrong and in 5 minutes he was up to his eyeballs in sh***, an apparent reference to SpaceX's failed rocket launch in April. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.